Attention listeners, Aftersight's annual hike is coming up on July 27th.
It was a really good experience for me.
Visit aftersight.org/hike and become an audio trekker today.
That hike today gave me so much courage.
Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. This is your host, Bill Lundgren. I'm delighted to have you here. And we're going to have an interesting, I hope interesting topic for you today. And it's going to be my producer, Jonathan Price, and myself talking about a topic that whenever I've mentioned that we were going to do this, people said, "Oh God, I'm so glad you're doing this." And it's talking about keeping your mental health in an election period. In other words, trying to get through all the rhetoric and so forth of this coming presidential election and election of different members of Congress and so forth, and without losing your mind. And we're not talking about the politicians. They won't be listening to us, I suspect. But all of us are deeply affected by what's going on. So, Jonathan, welcome. Is there anything we need to announce to people before we begin?
Yeah, real quick. I just want to make sure that everybody knows off the top that while we are going to be talking about the mental health side of politics, we are not going to be talking about policies. We're not going to be talking about what one party thinks. We're not going to be bashing one side or the other. We're going to be taking a very neutral look at the mental health capacities surrounding politics and election seasons and how they kind of affect our just daily lives. And we're not talking policy. We're not talking about Trump or Biden. We're not talking any about that stuff.
We're not taking any sides with any candidate or anything like that. The question that we have is, how do you deal with the rhetoric, wherever it's coming from? How do you deal with people who have an opinion different from yours or are trying to make you listen to their side of the thing and, and trying to, how do we tone down the rhetoric?
That's right. It's important to note also that you and I come from probably different sides of the aisle, and we come from, and which is good. I mean, I'm not opposed to saying that I am leaning more to the right and I'm more conservative. I don't know where you lean necessarily, but that doesn't matter. Yeah. Bill and I have had an amazing relationship, both professionally and friend-wise, over the last 2 years, and I count him as a very dear friend of mine.
Well, I feel the same toward you.
I appreciate you. I value your opinion, and you've helped me through a lot of things. And so this is a real-world practical application to what our society, I think, should look like.
I've had an advantage for much of the years that I've been a therapist. I've worked with a lot of couples. And couples who come in because they don't hear each other. And so one of the first things I have to do with such a couple is teach them some skills which are a little cumbersome for friendship, but it's not. The basic essence is good, and that is, rather than trying to yell and scream and make your point louder than the other person, I really invite people to instead of opposing or saying you're wrong, inquiring of the other person. Well, I'm not sure that I agree with that, but I want to hear more about it, how you see it. And sometimes with couples particularly, I will even ask them to let one person speak and the other then paraphrases what he or she heard, and not go on to give your side of the thing until the person that has spoken feels that you've understood what was said. And then you can give your opinion or whatever. And there's a lot to be said for that in terms of, because we think by yelling louder, we'll get a point across. And oftentimes, that's exactly what doesn't happen. And we get angry. Our hearing shut down and our thinking shut down, and we don't get anywhere with it. And that's true for the person we're talking to as well as for ourselves. So I think that a lot of mental health can be achieved by just listening to the other person, even though you disagree. Listen to what the person is saying, and then expect the other to do the same for you.
I don't know if you mentioned it in your opening part there, but it's really the idea of the curiosity aspect, the word curiosity. It's like, we should all be curious, George, and, go seeking out things and new ideas and new things and how to think about things. And, you may not have an opinion about something. You may not have a particular stance on something. But if you do, and you do have a very passionate stance, challenge yourself to argue the other side of it. Because I remember being in debate, and they would always teach you have to debate the pro and con of a particular subject.
Yeah, right.
So you had to do your research
don't teach that
on
anymore.
both sides. No, we don't, unless you're in debate team. But then everybody on debate team gets thrown in a trash can. So, but it's important to make sure that you're asking who, what, when, where, why, how of all of these situations, and just allowing your mind and your ability to be curious evolve naturally. And it's good to surround yourself with people who may know more than you and who may have different ideas than you.
Right. Well, the thing is, it's not just the curiosity, but to be able to look at the debates and so forth from the standpoint of two different aspects. One is the emotional aspect, which is the advertisers have used emotion to sell toothpaste, to wrinkle cream, whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
And but what we need to do is, understand the emotion. We have emotion, we'll respond to the emotional appeal, but we also have to use what some people call logic or just thinking, and to kind of counteract. The two have to work together. The emotion and the logic have to work together. But there's a lot of pressure for us to get into the emotion, and that's including the yelling and so forth. And trying to sell toothpaste to us in the form of politics. And that's what we have to avoid. And the person, if you listen with curiosity to what the person is saying, then you can also think, does that sound reasonable to me? And if it doesn't, there isn't. The person, of course, you're talking to may feel that's unreasonable, but you're the one that has to live with the consequences of your decision. And if you say, I don't think that quite fits, and then you can go to somebody else and check it out. And in that way, you can get a balanced picture and understand what even if you start off not having any opinion, you'll gradually say, oh, okay, I see this side of the issue. This is what I'm feeling and so forth. And it takes more work. It's very easy just to make a snap judgment and that person is an idiot, I'm yada, yada, yada. But that's not what you want, particularly with friendships.
Well, and you also get into those, think tank or not think tanks. What do you call it? Where echo chambers, where you keep going down. It's okay to surround yourself with people who agree with you. That there's nothing wrong with that. But when you think that that's the only way to think, then that's where you can get into trouble. And opening up your mind to a different way to look, at a particular issue. I think it's important to do.
Exactly.
And you were talking about how the people who yell and scream are sometimes the loudest, even though they may not get their point across. I'm also going to argue on the other side of that sometimes those people can be so intimidating that they end up being given into.
Yeah.
And they become people you're afraid of.
The intention. That's the intention, is to intimidate you. And that's the emotional part coming out. You say, wait a minute, I'm feeling intimidated. Because it comes to the other issue is that you have every right to stop the conversation if you're feeling intimidated. To say, look, I have to go now, or, for some reason I want to chew on what you told me. And just stop it right there. The same thing in terms of there is a knob on your radio or TV. It's called an on-off switch.
No, that doesn't exist, Bill.
Yeah, apparently. But I have, for a long time, I was listening to the news while I do my workout in the morning. And I started finding it difficult to even do my usual routine. And I said, okay, that's it. And so now since I'm hard of hearing, I wear hearing aids. I take the hearing aids out and I do my workout, which is very dull during all the counting and so forth. But I do the workout, I get it done, and I feel better because I've given myself some quiet.
Yes.
And there's very little of that right now. And so you have the right to do that and the obligation to yourself. Remember, the most important thing is self-care. Frankly, in order for you to make rational decisions in the voting booth, you've got to be taking care of yourself and give yourself time to think some things out. Think about what it is that is meaningful to you.
Yeah.
And to kind of tune out the yelling and screaming. And if you think somebody is totally wrong, that's fine. That's your opinion. And it's really the hardest thing in the world. And I've told my clients, I cannot change you. I can show you how to change. I know I can show you how it would benefit to change, but I can't change you. And yet so much of what goes on is trying to get people to change us through a certain way. Now, if you can show me that candidate does this or is good or that or bad or whatever, then I can think about it and then I can elect to change my opinion or not.
Right.
And that's the only power that anybody has, is just to lay out what you think. And if you can do that in a reasonable way that somebody's going to hear you and you provide the same for the other person, it's going to be much healthier for you than to get into fights and break off for friendships and so forth. Because after the election, we've got to, continue on with our business. And
there is life after,
believe it or not.
November 4th or whenever that
November
is.
5th, yeah.
5th, yeah.
Yeah, somebody told me that they talked to a travel agent, and the agent told him, been astounded at the number of people signing up for international travel that will take them out of the country from November 1st to November 10th.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I don't.
It's both sad and kind of funny at the same time.
That's right. That's right. I've got friends who are even looking at dual citizenship.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's how.
Oh my goodness.
How excessive the whole process has been.
Well, we've lost the ability to, one, like you said toward the beginning, we've lost the ability to logic and reason. Yeah. And we've lost the ability to have intellectual, calm, rational discussions. not arguments, discussion. There's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we have to create the environment for it. Even if the other person is wanting to go into trying to sell the wrinkle cream by emotion and, yelling and screaming, we have the capacity to say, okay, no, this is not going to work. I want to hear your argument, but I want to be able to do that without turning down my hearing aid.
Well, in regard to that, the wrinkle cream, not the hearing aid. When we have the ability to meet with those people who have the different opinions, when we come at it from that humble perspective, we're then able to hear them on a little bit different level. It becomes, and that person is going to hopefully say, oh, you know what? I was actually thinking the same thing. I'm glad you came to me so here's what I believe. Here's what I think. Here's what I approach. And here's how I think about this. And then you can say, oh, okay, I was a little confused. And that gives me a little bit more clarity on what I think. And it may be very different, but you've got to at least start with that humility aspect, because if you don't, you've got to ask that who, what, when, where, why. That's just part of it. You'll create a really interesting friendship and relationship.
Well, I think part of it is important to understand there will be disagreements, and sometimes they will get heated. And you have to understand that that's part of the issue. You want to minimize it. But the other thing is to, particularly at the end of the disagreement, if one of you or both of you can kind of acknowledge that, we're not going to change each other's minds, but we still want to be friends. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to get on a human level, regardless of, because I don't say to couples, you'll never have disagreements. It's a question of how do you handle them, and how do you remain a couple even though you have some deep-seated disagreements.
Right.
And it's like setting some rules.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, I disagree with you, but I want you to know that I still respect you.
Yep.
I still want to be your friend.
Yeah. That respect is very key.
We will have disagreements. Like you were saying, you're more conservative, and you're well aware, I think, that I'm more liberal.
Yep.
But that is not an issue for us.
No.
Because we respect both of us from where we're coming from.
Yeah, and it's a good way for me. It's a good way for me to learn from you, and you to learn from me. And we're always thinking about new ideas and new things and how we see the world.
And the other piece of it is in listening to another person of a different viewpoint, you may even say to them, I hadn't thought about that aspect of it.
Boy,
I'll have to think about it. And I think that's real important to say, I think you're totally dead wrong. I never want to speak to you again. It's, say, okay, that's a different viewpoint. I'll have to chew on that.
Yep.
And, be able to say, okay, I certainly will consider what you're saying. I'm not throwing it out totally, but I do have a different opinion, and you let me tell you my side of it. Yeah. And you see, if both of you feel heard, in a way, that's more important than what you actually are saying to each other.
Yep.
And that's the respect that you show to another person.
Yeah. Well, so if I'm the person who doesn't want to have conversations about politics, because there's quite a lot of people who just either don't care, right. They don't want to have conversations, they could care less who's running for librarian or senator or president, or they don't, no cares. If I'm that person, how do I handle this climate that I'm in? You said turn off the power to, turn the radio off, turn the TV off, turn social media off. What do I do outside of that?
Well, the thing is, it's important for us to say, look, I know you have a lot of feelings about this. I don't have that kind of feelings, and I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I've taken a position that you probably disapprove of, but because I need the peace and quiet, or whatever words you want to say, just be upfront.
Yeah.
And I really would rather talk about fishing. I'd rather talk about something other than politics, because I've been listening to it all the time, and and it's getting a little old now.
Yep.
And so, let's talk about something else. And if they don't, I say, well, I guess we'll have to wait until you're ready to talk about something else, because I may be narrow-minded, or what, you could put yourself down if you want.
I may be that staunch man up on the. I'm the staunch old man up on the pedestal and the driveway, right, saying, "Get off my lawn, you filthy kids!" Oh man.
Yeah, and say, and it really is important also to just be honest, but not honest in a belligerent way, but just
right.
Say, I have been listening to the news all morning, and I'm saturated. And you see, that's when we get into self-care. And this includes, when I was talking about taking out my hearing aids when I'm working out so I don't listen to, it's also true that we've got to give ourselves time out.
Yep.
We make kids do time out. Why we don't do it to adults, I'm not sure. But we have to take time out to go and breathe, do some meditation. The most important thing during this period is deep breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what political party you belong to just take time to breathe, to get out in the woods, to go fishing, to go for a hike, and whatever, to get away from it. Because the thing is, when you're saturated, it's real hard to be objective in your thinking.
Yep.
But you can get a better perspective when you get away from something for a while, and then you come back fresh. It's like an artist will stop and say, okay, I'm not feeling inspired. And so they go away and do something else, and then come back to the canvas and say, now I've got a perspective on this thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the tragedy of what, with this multimedia assault that we're getting, is that we will have some difficulty getting away from the topic. And, and I know the reporters are trying to give us the full story, but we get the full story in every detail, and there's just only so much that we can take in.
Yep. Well, and
I'll speak for myself. It's only so much I can take in.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, there's only so much everybody can take in. And even my most favorite topic, when I talk about music or I talk about sports, like I can only talk about that for so long, and I have to detox even from that.
That's right.
There's all these wonderful ways to detox yourself, and there's an appropriate way to engage in a conversation, engage in an ideological system. And then there's a way to disengage from that. Mm-hmm. And so many times there are some people who will fall so far down the rabbit hole that they can't see the light of day. And I think without getting too far down a rabbit hole, for lack of a better term, there's there has to be an honest look, not only at yourself, what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, what you're going through, but then understanding that a lot of other people are going through the same thing. They don't have your same belief, but they're going through the same type of questions and beliefs. And, well, why is this person being stupid? And why is this person thinking this way? And why can't they just think like me? That is a dangerous question. If everybody thought like you, nothing would get done in this world.
But I think it's I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
That's right.
And we keep hammering away, and we think that if we keep hammering, we'll finally get the point across. And it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And sometimes we have to find a different way of looking at it, or just step back and not do anything and just let it sit for a while.
That's right.
And there's a part of our brain, people are just finding out that the brain is working all the time, even when we're asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when we wake up or at least I wake up in the morning, and a solution to a problem that I had before going to bed appears, and I don't have any awareness of having come up with a solution.
Right. Yep.
But the brain does it for me. But I have to let the brain do its thing on its own and not push it to a solution. Because the more that I push, the less likely I am to find the solution. But if I step back, and then I always tell people I get my best ideas in the shower, and I go in the shower not planning to think about anything. And then all of a sudden it becomes clear to me because I've let it settle itself.
Yeah, that's where I remember that I forgot milk at the grocery store.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question of just, you get so focused on it, like my dog and his bone. He just keeps, going at it and going at it. And, the bone's there. It's not going to do anything. But, there's a certain thing that we think that if we keep hammering at it, the nail is going to stay in the wall. And that isn't necessarily true. And the truth for people who are trying to convince you of something, I'm sorry, I have a pretty clear idea of what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Then that's a great way to take that stand and to kind of end the conversations, and not because you're not ending it out of malice. You're just ending it because you know what you want to do. You know what way you're going to
I've thought about it. Right.
You've presented your facts. You've presented your, and I'm not a huge fan of the phrase, let's agree to disagree, because then that just kind of leaves, in my mind, hostility. But I can understand where that phrase comes from, where we're going to be at an impasse, and that's going to be okay.
Right. Well, I think the issue is where do we want to put our energies? If I've already made up my mind what I'm going to do, and quite honestly, I'm going to have to say, I've made up my mind, it's not going to be worth the energy to change it. I've really thought about this. I'm comfortable with my decision, and I'm not going to try to foist it on you. So let's talk about something else. That's all. That's fine. You've made up your mind. So let's go on and talk, go on to another subject. And then maybe after letting things rest for a while, we may come up with, something may occur to us, a question that I might ask you of something I'm still puzzled about. But for now, it's just a matter of letting it go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm going to have this conversation come to an end, but I think it's important to note that violence on any spectrum, whether it be political, or the like, or any violence, is not appropriate.
Absolutely.
And I just want to tell everybody right now that I do not condone violence in any case and form. And I appreciate the servicemen and women who protect this country. We've been talking this month about all of our veterans and our people who keep us safe, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, Secret Service, our police, our national, all of these people who are out here defending our freedoms and protecting us and making sure that we are safe on a daily basis. I cannot thank you guys enough. And yeah,
Absolutely.
there are people who should not be in those services that are, but that's why we get out and vote. That's why we vote in local elections. That's why we vote in national elections. And if you want to make your voice heard, that's the way to do it.
Absolutely.
The pen and the paper.
Through the ballot.
And I want to, and just again, from the bottom of my heart to the top of my head and the bottom of my feet, violence is never going to solve the issues that are currently going on. Right now, we have a heart problem in our country on both sides.
Right.
And I want to see it repaired. I want to see it changed. And a candidate's not going to do that. A president's not going to do that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to do that. You're going to do that. We are going to do that.
There's an interesting study that's come out that's looked at what actually goes on in the battlefield. And they went even far back in the Civil War, and they discovered that there were a lot of service people who could not kill. And they shot the bullets into the ground rather than to kill somebody, even though their life may be in danger, because they value life.
Yeah. Wow.
And that says a lot to the decency of humanity.
Yeah.
And, so we have to pay attention to that. The people really do care, and we have to respect those people, the silent people who, who will help us, but don't have to make so much noise and don't have to kill or do any violent act in order to, to be helpful. I want to let people know this has been Blindsight, and you have a way, not a ballot box, but you can pick up a phone and call our feedback line, which is 720-712-8856, or send us an email. Send us an email at feedback@aftersight.org. I got it. It's feedback
there we go.
at aftersight.org.
Perfect.
Great. And we'll see you next session.